Come sit down by the fire, let your night unwind. I'll spin you a web of tall tales. Tangled in your mind, is it real or just a fantasy? You'll never know the line. Come and hear my stories, you'll have a damn good time.
Bottle's empty, but it's louder than my mind. His freight car rattles through the pieces left behind. Every town I pass, another ghost I used to know. I keep running from the daylight, 'cause the night won't let me go.
Chapter 1. Old Faith. The night was cold enough to bite. Boxcar Mark rode a freight car with the doors cracked, the wind cutting through the gap and carrying the scent of creosote and pine. A full moon hung above the rails. The sky was crowded with stars, more than he'd seen in years, maybe because there were no fences to block them. The wheels hammered the joints in the track. The rhythm found a match in his head. Bars sliding, gates clanking, the deadbolt of a steel door thrown with bored authority. He shut his eyes and saw the yard again. Dust, sweat, a ring of faces, the twitch of a guard's jaw before a baton came down. He could still feel the weight of a boot on his neck, the grit of his teeth. Coming out didn't shake any of it loose. It just turned the volume down long enough to breathe. He flexed his hands and listened for the pop in the knuckles. The scar across his right hand caught the moonlight. He rubbed it until it warmed. On the floor by his boots sat his leather book sack, the only thing he owned that wasn't on his body. Toothbrush, 2 shirts, a torn photograph folded into quarters. Enough bills to keep him moving for a week, not much else. The train braked hard. The cars screamed until sparks sewed a brief orange line along the rail. Mark pulled the door wider and looked out. A platform drifted along at a crawl. A half-rotten station with a sign missing letters. Old Faith, the O and the I hanging crooked, the D tilted like it had given up. Beyond it, a town slumped into a basin of dark hills. One street, a few lit windows. An old head frame from the mine took up half the horizon like a broken rib. He dropped to the gravel and let the train slide past. When the last car rattled away, the night grew taller. No traffic, no voices, just the far-off hum of a transformer and a dog barking a block over. He should have stayed on and let Oregon roll under him until morning, but his right boot sole had split at the toe and flapped when he walked, and one knee of his jeans was giving out. There'd be a shop open. There was always a shop open, because someone always needed something at the wrong hour. Mark slung the book sack over his shoulder and headed down the main drag. Storefronts watched him with the blank faces of the closed. A barber with yellowed posters of haircuts. A bar with a neon beer sign dead in its middle. A pawn shop loaded with shadow. A deli cooler hummed behind the glass of a ghosted market. Then he saw the hardware store. Strip lights on, bell over the door, paper sign taped inside the window. Open 24. He stepped in and the bell announced him like a snitch. The air smelled like oil, dust, and fertilizer. 2 guys stood at the counter, the older one thin as a rake, the younger built like he'd fallen asleep under a heat lamp and never woke fully. The younger man's mouth worked on a toothpick. Both of them tracked Mark without moving their heads. "Evenin'," the older one said. It came out flat, polite by contract more than habit. "Looking for glue," Mark said. "Rubber cement, and a sewing kit." "Aisle 3, bottom shelf for the cement." The old man's eyes dropped to Mark's boots. then to the knee of his jeans. He nodded once like he'd solved something small. Kits are by the register. Mark walked the aisles. Hammers in a steel forest. Garden tools with dirt still clinging to them. Chains, ropes, boxes of screws that had been stacked and restacked 100 times. He picked a tall can of shoe glue, then sacked the needle kit. Needles, heavy thread, tiny scissors that would likely bend the first time they met denim. He added a pack of alcohol wipes, the cheap kind, the kind that sting like they're doing more than they are. The bell on the door rang behind him again. A couple came in, looked him over, then split to opposite ends. Mark kept his shoulder loose and his eyes down. He brought the items to the counter, set them careful so nothing rolled. "That'll do you?" the old man asked. "For now." The young one smiled without his eyes. "Traveling through?" "For now," Mark said again. He put cash on the counter. The old man counted it slow, the way people do when they want time. "Truck stop up the road," the younger one said. "If you're hungry." "Thanks." He took the bag and turned for the door. The bell rang. The cold hit his face like a rinse. He stepped into the street and kept to the darker side. Past the bar with the dead neon. Past a mural of the town from better days. All gold splashes and strong men who smiled for the painter. He heard quick steps behind him. The scrape of shoes that weren't sure of the ground. He reached the mouth of an alley before the steps got brave. The first came from his right, fast, cheekbones sharp as glass, eyes like pulled wire. The second hung back, jittering. The third drifted behind him to close the box. "Hey, man," Wire Eyes said, licking his lips. "You got a light or some change or both?" "No." "Come on, traveler," the second one said. "We're neighbors around here." "Not my neighborhood," Mark said. He kept his left shoulder to the brick, right hand free. Wire Eyes smiled and showed a box cutter. The blade clicked out like a little metal tongue. The jittery one laughed at nothing and pulled at the sleeves of his hoodie. The guy behind Mark had a length of chain looped around his hand. Mark set his bag down and stood square. He took one step left, crowding the alley wall so only one of them could get to him at a time. The chain twitched behind his head, testing the air. Wire Eyes came in fast with the box cutter low, a lazy swipe at gut level. Mark batted the wrist with his left hand and put 2 hard shots into Wire Eyes' throat and chest. Not pretty, not big, but enough. The kid folded and started coughing. Sound like glass sliding in a jar. The second guy hopped in now, because that's how it works. Fear, then courage, then too late. He had a broken beer bottle he thought made him taller. Mark stepped straight into him, head to nose, a short pop that turned the man's knees to water. Mark shoved him into the dumpster and felt the bottle drop. He didn't follow. He pivoted. The chain sang in the dark. Mark ducked and it took a groove out of the brick. The guy swung again and stepped too close. Mark grabbed him by the coat and yanked him forward into a right hand that started at the floor. Jaw. Then a left. Then another right. A rhythm learned in places where stopping early got you hurt. The chain slipped from numb fingers and hit the ground with a tired clatter. Mark went still, breathing in, breathing out, listening for a fourth. There wasn't one. Wire Eyes lay on his side, trying to pull air around the pain in his throat. The man by the dumpster moaned and clutched his face. The chain swinger had found the wall and slid down it in a slow sit, mouth open, eyes glassy, as if the night had taken his name and wasn't giving it back yet. Mark picked up his bag and checked his knuckles. Skin split on the right hand. The old scar had opened thinly and bled a red smile. He tore an alcohol wipe, pressed it to the cut, and gritted his teeth until the sting leveled out. He could feel his heart again now, that the noise had burned off. "Bad choice," he said to no one, or all three. A screen door creaked somewhere. A voice called, "You all right out there?" No one answered. The voice didn't ask again. Mark looked toward the station. The platform sat empty under the big moon, the sign still hanging its tired letters. He could climb back on the next freight and let Old Faith be a bad dream. 3 men and a narrow alley and another night he didn't want. He could also keep walking and find a room at the truck stop, patch his boot, sew his knee, make coffee in the bathroom sink, and sit with his thoughts until the sky went the kind of gray that forgives faces. He wiped his hands on his jeans and started toward the road. At the end of the block he stopped, turned back, and dropped a few crumpled bills near Wired Eye's shaking hand. Not mercy, not guilt, a payment to the quiet, to keep it with him a little longer. The stars were still out. The moon threw the headframe's shadow across the street like a long finger. Mark stepped over it and kept going, boots striking a steady pace. The kind a man uses when the only thing he knows for sure is that he's not done moving. Behind him, Old Faith went still again. Ahead, the highway cut a dark line out of the basin. He walked it. And when the memory of the box cutter blinked back, the cheap blade slashing nothing but air, he felt nothing but the old familiar heat in his hands, the one thing that never left him, putting men down. Chapter 2. Maggie's Diner. Mark walked into the night with his shoulders hunched and his hands shoved deep into his pockets. The road stretched 2 miles past Old Faith before he found the glow of fluorescent tubes buzzing above a gas station canopy. A truck stop. To the left, a boxy diner with chipped red paint and a sign that read Maggie's in flickering neon. Next to it, a motel that had gone gray with rot, curtains hanging limp in the windows. The emptiness in his stomach won the argument. He pushed through the glass door into the diner. The place smelled of bacon grease burned into steel. The counters were chipped, the booths sagged in the middle, and the waitresses wore faces that didn't have time for smiles. Mark slid into a booth in the back, away from the light, and ordered eggs, toast, and coffee. While he waited, he dug the sewing kit from his sack. He bent over the knee of his jeans, pushing the needle through the denim, pulling the thread with a slow, steady rhythm. The stitch was crooked, but it would hold. By the time the food landed in front of him, the knee was sealed shut and the thread cut. He was halfway through the eggs when the door jingled and a man walked in. Leather jacket, sharp jaw, hair slicked back with oil. He scanned the room like he'd lost something, then spotted Mark. No hesitation. He crossed the floor and slid into the booth across from him. "Hell of a left hook you got there," the man said. "Name's Dutch." Mark said nothing. He sipped his coffee, eyes on the steam. "I was smoking out back of the hardware store. Saw you handle those tweakers." Dutch leaned in, elbows on the table. "Clean work. Most folks would have run. You didn't." The silence stretched. Dutch waited. Mark chewed the crust of toast like it was gravel. Finally, he set it down. "You can call me Boxcar," he said. Dutch grinned like he'd just won a bet. "Figures. Man like you belongs on the rails. But I got something better. There's a place in the next town, big town, compared to this dump. They run fights there. Real money in it. Run by a man they call the Bishop." Mark's eyes narrowed. "Yeah," Dutch said, nodding. "Andre Mancini. Tied up with the boys back east. Slick bastard, but he's dangerous. Still, if you can handle yourself like I saw tonight, you could walk out with cash in your pocket." Mark thought it over. A fight was a fight. He'd bled for nothing before. Maybe bleeding for money was a step up. Dutch broke the moment by reaching across the table and snatching a slice of Mark's toast. He took a bite, chewed slow, eyes locked on Mark the whole time. Mark's first instinct was violence, the kind that came without thinking, the kind that had kept him alive. But he clenched his fist under the table and let it pass. Something about Dutch's grin, cocky, crooked, familiar, pulled him back to the memory of a childhood friend long buried. "Next town over," Dutch said, around the toast. "Forget Old Faith. That place is already dead. Come with me. I'll get you a room and we'll talk in the morning." Mark studied him. Dutch had the smell of risk, but also opportunity, and for the first time in a long while, Mark felt the stir of direction. They left the diner and stepped into the cold night. Dutch walked him to a truck parked by the motel. A '57 Chevy rebuilt into something sharp and impossible to ignore, metallic red, gleaming even under the pale street lamp. Mark paused. Hell of a ride. Dutch patted the hood like it was a loyal dog. Built it with my own hands. Don't trust much else in this world, but I trust her. Mark climbed in. The engine rumbled alive, smooth as a predator stretching its legs. They pulled out into the highway, the lights of Old Faith shrinking in the mirror, swallowed by the dark. Ahead, the glow of a bigger town waited, along with the bishop. And maybe, for Boxcar Mark, something worth breaking himself for. Chapter 3. Viper's Head. The motel smelled of mildew and bleach that hadn't done its job. Mark woke to the rattle of pipes in the wall and the faint sound of a woman laughing outside, brittle and tired. He sat up on a mattress that sagged in the middle and watched cockroaches scatter around the stained wallpaper. It wasn't prison, but it didn't feel much different. Through the blinds, the light was crawling over the parking lot. Night's last customers were climbing into dented cars, heels clicking against asphalt, mascara streaking down their faces. Mark stood at the door for a while, breathing air that tasted like rust. One of the women spotted him, tottering on tired legs. She smoothed her hair, forced a smile. You looking for some company, friend? He didn't turn. Get the hell away from me. Her heels clicked off in another direction. The sound of an engine broke through the morning quiet. Dutch's '57 Chevy slid into the lot, paint gleaming like fresh blood under the gray sun. Dutch spotted him, grinned, and shot a finger gun. Mark gave a slow nod in return. Morning, Boxcar, Dutch called as Mark climbed in. Sleep well? Mark just shut the door. Yeah, Dutch laughed. That's about what I figured. The truck purred through the streets, carrying them into Viper's Head. Compared to Old Faith, it was another world. Towers of glass and steel catching the morning light, traffic already pressing the streets. But the shine was skin deep. Mark could see the rot underneath. Boarded up storefronts, alleys lined with needles and burned trash, men slumped against walls like broken statues. A city alive on the outside, dead inside. A whitewashed tomb. Dutch pointed as they rolled past a tower that stabbed the sky. All marble pillars and ornate carvings that didn't belong in Oregon. Italian stonework, imported windows, gold trim catching the light. That's Mancini's tower, Dutch said with pride. The bishop's palace. Mark gave it a look, slow and unimpressed. He let the silence hang until Dutch laughed. You're a tough crowd, Boxcar. Tell me about the fights. Dutch's grin widened. Straight to business, all right. Every Friday and Saturday night, down at the old mine. Abandoned since the '80s. The bishop turned it into an amphitheater, gladiator pit for men who've got nothing else. He took a corner, guiding the Chevy toward the edge of town. The skyscrapers thinned out, replaced by warehouses and broken chain link. Finally, the ground dropped, and the black mouth of the old mine opened in front of them. Dutch parked at the edge and waved a hand toward the hollow. Looks dead now, but come Friday, it's packed. Hundreds come crawling out of the dark, betting tables, booze, women, the works. And in the pit, blood. They walked down into the hollow, gravel crunching under their boots. The amphitheater stretched wide, wood bleachers built into the rock, chain-link fencing forming a rough circle in the middle. Empty now, quiet as a grave. Dutch lit a cigarette and leaned on a post. There's one man runs it down there. Vinny the Brick. Works concrete during the week. Breaks jaws on the weekend. He's Mancini's pride and joy. Never lost. 7 bodies to his name, all swept under the rug by the bishop. Folks love him for it. He's a golden goose. Mark stood in the center of the ring, looking at the scarred dirt, the stains that would never come out. He flexed his fists, slow. I want him, Mark said. Dutch blew smoke toward the sky and shook his head. You don't just walk in and get the champ, Boxcar. You'll have to climb. Prove yourself. A few fights first. Then maybe the bishop lets you stand across from Vinny. Mark's eyes stayed on the dirt. Then I'll climb. Dutch chuckled, not mocking, just amused. That's the spirit. But you'd better understand, Vinny doesn't fight to win. He fights to end men. You ready for that? Mark finally looked at him, eyes flat and cold. Been ready my whole life. For the first time, Dutch's grin faltered just a little. He studied Mark, then flicked his cigarette into the pit. All right, then. Let's see if you can bleed your way to the brick. Chapter 4. The Lion's Den. Friday night, the mine was alive. Smoke hung over the hollow, thick with sweat, booze, and cheap cigars. Pickup trucks lined the rim, their headlights pointing down into the pit. The bleachers were already filling with bodies, bills passing hands, bets scribbled into notebooks. A low roar built in the crowd, the sound of hunger before it's fed. Dutch guided Mark through the side gate, cutting through groups of men counting cash and girls peddling drinks in plastic cups. The air stank of copper and spilled whiskey. Mark kept his head down, but his eyes scanned everything. The exits, the guards with pistols at their hips, the blood-dark stains and the dirt that never washed away. At the far end, past a table stacked with envelopes, a man sat on a steel chair like it was a throne. Andre Mancini, the bishop. White suit, black shirt, gold rings on every other finger. His hair slicked back with too much pomade, his face carved into a permanent scowl. He didn't look at people so much as through them, weighing their worth against a scale only he could see. Dutch leaned close. Play it cool, Boxcar. The bishop's not the forgiving type. They stepped forward. Mancini's eyes flicked up once, then dropped back to the papers in his lap. Dutch, he said, voice flat as gravel. Didn't I tell you last time we were done? Dutch grinned like it was a joke between friends. You did, but I brought you something you're going to want to see. Mancini sighed, pulled a cigar from his pocket, and bit the end off with his teeth. You never learn. Guy's a fighter, Dutch pressed. I saw him. 3-on-1 in Old Faith, and he put him down like nothing. He's hungry, I'm telling you. Bishop, you've got yourself another golden goose. Mancini lit the cigar, puffed twice, and let the smoke crawl between them. Another Dutch fairy tale. You think I got time for this? He'll fight tonight, Dutch said. 1 round, no risk to you. If he bleeds, he bleeds. If he wins, you've got yourself a draw. Mancini's eyes finally found Mark. Cold, calculating. He looked him up and down, pausing on the scar across his knuckles, then on the stitched-up knee of his jeans. You, what's your name? Mark let the silence hang. The noise of the pit filled the space. Cheers, jeers, fists pounding the rail. Finally he spoke. Boxcar. Something about the tone made Mancini sit back a little. Not impressed, not afraid, just measuring. He waved a hand. Fine, throw him in. If he dies, he dies. If he lives, maybe I'll look at him again. Dutch clapped Mark on the shoulder. There you go. Welcome to the big leagues. They stripped him down in a side tent, shirt off, hands taped. The referee barely looked at him, just checked the tape and jerked his chin toward the pit. The crowd rose when he stepped in. His opponent was already waiting, a slab of a man with shoulders like stone and a face carved into something ugly. He grinned through a mouthguard and cracked his neck, eager to show off for Mancini's people. The bell rang, though it was more of a tire rim clanged with a hammer, and the man came swinging wild. Mark didn't back up. He stepped inside, felt the fists glance off his shoulders, and buried a shot into the ribs. The sound was hollow, wet. The man staggered, but came back with more, wild as a drunk. Mark slipped, countered, let his fists do what they were built for. One to the jaw, one to the temple, one to the nose. The man's knees buckled. The crowd howled for more. The ref didn't step in. Mark's fists kept moving, driving the man against the cage until blood painted the dirt. The man's arms dropped, his eyes gone. Mark stopped. His chest heaved, his knuckles split. He looked at the referee. The ref hesitated, glancing toward Mancini's chair. The bishop didn't move. The crowd roared for another shot. Mark took a step back anyway. He let the man slump to the ground in a heap. The ref finally waved it off. Too late. The pit shook with noise. Boos, cheers, fists beating against the rail. Half angry it ended, half thrilled by the blood. Mark stood in the center, shoulders squared, eyes steady. When he looked up toward the bleachers, he saw Mancini, watching with the faintest flicker of interest. Not approval, not yet, just interest. And 2 rows down, a mountain of a man leaned forward, resting his arms on the rail. Vinny the Brick, the champ. His eyes locked on Mark, and a slow grin cut across his face. Dutch leaned in from the gate, grinning ear to ear. "Told you, Boxcar. You've got their attention now." Mark wiped the blood from his knuckles and said nothing. He didn't need to. The pit had spoken for him. Chapter 5. Blood in the Dust. The pit was still humming when Mancini came down from his chair. He moved like he owned every grain of dirt beneath his shoes. Dutch straightened, tried a smile. Mark just waited. "You fight again tomorrow," Mancini said. No question in it, no choice. Dutch spread his hands. "Bishop, the kid just—" Mancini's eyes cut through him. "He fights." Mark held Mancini's stare. "Fine." Saturday night bled into the pit with thicker smoke, heavier pockets. The crowd was bigger and louder. Dutch leaned in on the rail, shouting odds, already trying to make himself look like he belonged. Mark stepped into the cage again. His opponent, a wiry brute with knuckles like gravel. The man came fast, swinging wild, but Mark folded him in half with a body shot, then punished him with elbows until the crowd screamed. The ref didn't stop it. Mark did, backing off when the man collapsed in a heap, twitching but not waking. Paramedics rushed in. The word went around fast. Coma. The pit loved it. Mancini didn't smile. He just lit another cigar and watched with dead eyes. Vinny the Brick was supposed to fight next. The golden boy. But word came quick. His opponent had been in a car accident. No details. No one surprised. Dutch's jaw tightened. Mark knew better than to ask. Mancini rose, smoke curling around his head like a crown. Put Boxcar in with Vinny. The crowd erupted. Vinny stood in the corner of the cage, stone-faced. But Mark caught the flicker. The quick glance to Mancini, the twitch in his jaw. The champ wasn't ready for this. Not tonight. Mark stepped forward, fists loose, eyes locked. Dutch yelled something from the rail, but the crowd drowned it out. The bell rang. Vinny came hard, fists like bricks, and for a moment the pit turned into a furnace. Flesh hitting flesh, bone on bone. Mark dug into him, trading blow for blow, blood splattering the dirt. Vinny was big, but Mark was meaner. His fists found the jaw, the temple, the ribs. The champ staggered. The crowd surged. Mark pressed forward, smelling the kill. Vinny's guard dropped. His legs shook. Then sirens cut through the night. Floodlights blazed from the rim. Voices barked commands. Armored men poured in, rifles up. SWAT. Chaos detonated. The crowd scattered, bills flying, drinks spilling. Shots cracked overhead, warning or not. Fighters jumped the rails, women screamed, engines roared to life on the rim. In the cage, Vinny backed away, eyes wide. The ref dove flat. Mark spun, ducked the first officer through the gate and drove a fist into his mask. Plastic cracked. The man dropped. Another came swinging a baton. Mark took it on his arm, then countered with a hook that folded the man against the cage. "Boxcar!" Dutch's voice cut through the riot. He was at the side gate, waving. Mark shoved past another officer, boots pounding dirt. He grabbed his sack from where it leaned near the tent and followed Dutch into the madness. Bullets ripped the air. Lights blinded the path, but the '57 Chevy was waiting. Dutch fired it up, tires spitting gravel. Mark dove in as another officer lunged for him. He swung once, a short, brutal punch that sent the man down. And then the truck was flying out of the hollow, red paint catching every flash of blue behind them. The mine shrank in the rear view, sirens fading under the roar of the engine. Mark sat bleeding, knuckles raw, chest heaving. Dutch laughed like a lunatic, one hand on the wheel, the other pounding the dash. Hell of a show, Boxcar. Mark stared out the window at the empty dark. He'd almost had the champ. Almost. And now the whole town would be looking for him. Chapter 6. Fire in the Bones. Vinny the Brick hadn't taken the interruption well. Word around town said he was seething, pacing like a caged animal. His pride bruised worse than his ribs. For a man who built his name on never bending, almost losing to a stranger was poison. Mark didn't care. He'd seen enough men like Vinny, big dogs in small yards. His concern was staying invisible. He holed up in the motel, curtains drawn, the stink of mildew and cigarette burns on the carpet. $100 from Mancini's hand rested in his wallet, enough to ride a freight out of Viper's Head and never look back. And that was the plan. But plans never hold. Late that night, a knock rattled the thin door. Mark opened it to find a gaudy suit, gold chains swinging. A local pimp, face twisted with annoyance. "You've been here a week, stranger," the pimp said, stabbing a finger at Mark's chest. "Not a dime spent on my girls. Motel's my turf. You want to stay? You buy. Otherwise, you get out." Mark didn't answer. His fist did. A straight jab, fast and clean. The pimp dropped in the doorway like a sack of wet sand, nose broken, eyes rolling back. Mark shut the door and didn't look again. By midweek, the air outside felt heavier. Word was the bishop was losing grip. A raid on his pit should have been impossible. Half the cops were his. But whispers of federal heat drifted through the bars and alleys. Men who once stood tall in Mancini's shadow started crossing the street instead of shaking his hand. Mark kept his head down, sewed another patch into his jeans, spent his days listening to the buzz of the motel sign outside, convincing himself he'd catch the next train out. Then Dutch showed up, six-pack of beer in one hand, that easy grin on his face. "Thought I'd find you brooding," Dutch said, stepping in without asking. "Man like you could sour milk just by sitting next to it." They drank warm cans and let the hours crawl. Dutch told stories about his Chevy, about jobs gone wrong, and women who'd left too soon. He was rogue, unreliable, dangerous. But for a moment, Mark forgot. Dutch even got him to crack a smile, something Mark hadn't felt in years. When Dutch stood to leave, Mark almost asked him to stay. Almost. The night air was cool. Dutch walked across the lot toward his truck, whistling. Then came the screech. Rubber tearing asphalt. Headlights cutting across the motel. A black sedan slammed into Dutch. His body hit the hood, rolled, and landed hard in the gravel. Two men climbed out. One carried a bottle lit with fire. Another followed with a second. They hurled them at the motel. Glass shattering. Flames burst against the walls, climbing fast. Mark was already moving when he saw the driver step out. Vinny the Brick. He pointed at Mark, laughing, and raised a middle finger. Then he slid back into the car as the fire roared. Mark's instinct was to chase, to tear Vinny out of the driver's seat and finish what the pit started. But Dutch was on the ground, coughing blood, his legs twisted wrong. Mark dropped beside him. "Stay with me." Dutch tried to grin but only spat red. The sedan peeled off into the night. Mark didn't watch him go. He pulled Dutch into his arms, flames snapping behind them, and dragged him to the Chevy. By the time the motel roof gave way, they were already tearing down the road, Dutch gasping in the seat beside him. Mark kept one hand on the wheel, the other holding Dutch steady. Sirens wailed behind them, but he didn't slow. He only had one thought now: get Dutch to the hospital before the fire finished what Vinny started. Chapter 7. Red Rain. Morning came, black and wet. Rain hammered the streets, turning gutters into rivers. Mark pulled his hood low and walked with purpose. The $100 left in his pocket pressed flat against his chest. Dutch was alive, barely, but broken. Mark's mind wasn't on money. It was on Vinny. He remembered Dutch's words. Concrete plant. That's where Vinny works when he's not breaking jaws for the bishop. The plant rose out of the rain like a gray fortress, smokestacks vanishing into clouds, trucks lined up like cattle waiting for slaughter. Men in hard hats shuffled through puddles, soaked before their shifts began. Vinny was there, barely 15 minutes on the clock, already barking orders. Thick arms swinging, face still bruised from the fight that never finished. Mark didn't wait. He stepped into the yard, boots splashing. His voice cut through the rain. "Vinny!" Heads turned. Vinny spun, scowl already forming. "Get the hell out of here. This is work, not play." "Pit's where you fight," Mark said, stepping closer. "But I'm not waiting for the pit." Vinny smirked, shaking his head. "You don't walk in here and tell me when. You want me? You wait till Friday." Mark charged. The surprise hit harder than any fist. His shoulder slammed Vinny into a stack of rebar, the clang echoing across the yard. Workers shouted, scattering, some climbing onto equipment for a better view. Rain poured harder, soaking both men until their skin gleamed under the storm. Vinny swung back, fists like bricks, but Mark didn't flinch. They traded blows in the mud and concrete, bone cracking on bone, blood mixing with rain. Vinny's size was raw power, but Mark's rage had precision. Every shot placed, every strike fueled by Dutch lying broken in a hospital bed. Finally, Mark caught him clean. Jaw, temple, ribs, one after another, relentless. Vinny staggered, slipped in the mud, fell to his knees. Mark didn't stop. His fists rained down until Vinny was a ruin. Blood spilling into the water, flowing red through gray concrete dust. The yard went silent except for the storm. Workers stood frozen, watching as the champ of Viper's head collapsed, face gone slack, eyes staring at nothing. Vinny the brick was dead. Mark stood over him, chest heaving, rain washing the blood from his hands. He knew the cost. In a town like this, word would already be moving faster than the storm. At the hospital, Dutch lay bandaged, eyes hazy from morphine. Mark sat by his bed, rain still dripping from his coat. "You're alive," Mark said. Dutch's lips curled weakly. "Can't kill me that easy." Mark almost smiled. But outside the room, whispers were spreading. A co-worker from the plant had already run to Mancini's men. By the time Mark left the hospital, the bishop knew his golden goose was gone. For Mancini, there was only one law, life for a life, and now Boxcar Mark belonged to him, a slave to the pit. Fights until death. But Mark had other plans. That night, he found the freight yard, climbed a ladder slick with rain, and pulled himself into a boxcar. The train groaned, coughed smoke, then lurched east. He sat in the dark, knuckles raw, body aching, watching the rain streak across the doorway. Behind him, Viper's head roared in anger. Ahead, Detroit waited. The bishop might call him a slave, but Mark was already gone. And when he hit Detroit, the world would remember his name.
I don't wake tomorrow, don't carve my name in stone. Just let the steel rails carry me for her